Here.
Oh God,
I'm not used to
I'm not either. I was telling Lindsay, I said they need to lower that volume a little bit just because it's a little startling.
and just make it maybe a little less awkward.
Yeah.
Like it's an awkward piece. Okay, so I've got this going live on Facebook, I believe.
Okay. How do I?
Yep, so now we're live streaming on Facebook, which means you could go to my page. I know we try to figure this out each time.
Okay.
And I'm gonna try to even just tag you in the comments.
Okay.
If that does anything, we're prototyping here.
Let me refresh.
Let me see if I can share to a friend's profile. That's what I tried to do last time. Heidi. Okay.
Let me refresh.
Yeah, it won't let me. There's something going on in that regard.
Hmm.
I'm going to put you in the comments though, see if that helps. But do you see it on my page? Like we're live on Facebook?
Um, I did, and then I refreshed, and then I lost you. So let me see if I can
Okay.
get you back.
And
Yeah, there you are.
I'll make it public, just see how that goes.
And I see my name.
But I couldn't share with you directly.
Hmm.
I'm also trying to understand this mirroring thing. I don't know if anyone else has been like, are people seeing what I'm seeing? Do you know what I mean? Because I find this very confusing when I look at podcasts.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, what are you thinking? Should we start?
Let's just start. I'm like I can't really be bothered trying to fix this right now. Let's just start. Yeah, we're
Fair
recording.
enough. Fair enough.
We're
And I think
live.
basically you probably could share it after somehow, but
Yeah. Yeah, because that's what I did last week.
yeah.
So I'll do that again.
Hi,
We will get
love.
it. Hello. Hello.
Let's have a cocktail to tech.
Cha-ching.
Trusting that
Oh,
technology will eventually be sorted out.
right. Mm.
It was so nice to check in with you yesterday and just wanting to name that we normally do our podcast Wednesday nights, and we both decided, agreed, even just kind of checked in with each other about
Yeah.
whether that felt right. Do you want to share a little about how that unfolded?
Yeah. So typically, Vanessa and I do a private check-in once a week, to kind of just see where we are with our lives and share more personal things and that kind of whatnot. And you had been away for the weekend and got back on Tuesday evening, and we were going to record, of course, yes, last night live, and we both realized that the check-in was more important,
Yeah.
and there were some things that we both needed to process a little bit with each other, something in common. And so we took that opportunity to do some self-care, because that's what, like, I was like, that was some really good self-care. And I'm so a couple things that I want to say about that, Podesta, is that I'm really glad that I advocated for myself,
Hmm.
and I'm glad that I am able to have my own back to ask for those needs, because that's so important to me. Um, and then to to ask for it and to leave it open for there to be some conversation around it, and then to check in later to see if that's what I still want, or maybe can I do something different, right? So that's important to me, and it's very different than what I would have done 5 years ago, 10 years ago, because I grew up in a home where I would say across the board, my siblings and I across the board were encouraged to just push yourself, push it along, like, get through it, get over it, that kind of thing. And I'm like, This is not something that I really want to push through."
Yeah.
And it was also something that I didn't necessarily want to process live on Facebook for the world to see, because it wasn't anyone's business except for you and I. And I mean, I chose to share it with you. And I'm noticing those nuances, the changes, those little changes that I'm making in my life that support me
Hmm.
in a much healthier and better way. And I'm like, thank God I figured that out.
Yeah. And I'm hearing what I experienced was attunement. Like you were attuning to yourself. There was self empathy. There was like, okay, this is a little too raw to just throw on, you know, a podcast. Like I actually
Mhm.
need a bubble with a friend instead. Um, and I will say it benefited me tremendously because I can, from my years of working on sets, politics, nonprofits, just push through
Mhm.
almost by default sometimes. And as a musician and a performer, it's like I can be highly activated and nervous and still have to get on stage,
Right.
right? So that competency is kind of built in, and I can almost step over myself.
Mhm.
So when you named feeling activated, wanting to do a quick pulse check on whether this was the best use of our time to just throw ourselves into a podcast, it gave me permission to check in with myself and go, wait, am I doing that default strategy that's just like posture over it and go because I'm skilled at that? Or do I need a little time to unpack this and metabolize it? And that was actually really true for me. So thank you, because while it was advocating for yourself, it ended up being advocating for us
Mhm.
in the process.
Yeah. Yeah, you're welcome. And I noticed that as we were processing, as after I had shared and you done some sharing, I was like, this was really good for both of us
Mhm.
to do this work. Yeah.
And just
Yeah.
holding up the power of that pause, right? So often I imagine for our audience, there's something that's been scheduled that's supposed to happen at this time with this person or
Mhm.
whatever. And it can be really tantalizing to just roll with it. I'm experiencing that myself. And what if it really doesn't feel right? It's like trusting your sensitivity there and naming it and just seeing
Mhm.
what the possibilities are.
Right. Right.
Hmm, that feels important to just name
Yeah.
because we just experienced it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Um, and I think the other thing that is important to point out is that I'm getting much better at not having to seek permission to just do it, to just like to put myself out there and just say, okay, this is what I need.
Yeah.
I'm asking for it. I'm hoping that I'm heard and seen and witnessed. Can you hold space? And not and again, putting it out there, not asking for permission, just saying this is what my needs are right now.
Yeah.
And so, and I mention that because um, in the past, I am someone who felt as if I had to give myself permission to ask for something or to do something that might have been not in the schedule, like not on the calendar. And I'm like, no, it's okay to change things up.
Hmm.
And so I guess I'm saying this because for those who are listening, if you're one of those people who feels like you need permission for something, grant yourself permission. Just grant yourself and just say, look, I'm doing this for me
Right.
because this is what I need right now. Yeah.
Mm, amen.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'd love to sort of fold something into that of, going on this 4-day camping trip with honey, right? Which for me is a lot of physical effort. It's not exactly the restorative. Nature's restorative, but doing so much in nature, not
Mm-hmm.
as restorative for me. And my ambitious self last week put a lot of stuff on my Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, kind of squeezed my week into 3 days. Thought I'd be so relaxed that I could come back and just kick ass, right? And the truth was, I came back and was like, I need replenishment. So, what I'm learning about myself with my business coaches yesterday and today, what I could do easily while still being tired was podcasts and teaching and coaching because they are restorative for me. And what I couldn't wrap my head around was like the 3-month business plan or the things I'm still building capacity around,
Mm-hmm.
right? Things that are like still very heavy learning curves for me. And this morning I had this on my calendar. I'm going to watch these 3 modules of sales and marketing. I'm going to understand my packages and my positioning and my signature system and create a roundtable event, right? This is all my sweet aspirational self. And this morning, all I could really do was like stare at the flowers.
Mm.
And I was like, okay, the anxiety came up. I want people to know it can look messy, right? My body's tired, my posture's low. I'm wanting rest. My calendar's telling me, no, this is something we're doing. The anxiety started to rise up into my chest. My breath got shallow. And I was like, oh gosh, what do I do? Because this is what I planned on doing today, and I clearly don't have capacity for it. I still need the restorative pieces that are both my strengths and my joy to replenish first.
Mm-hmm.
And I say this because it took a lot of trust to push those things off my calendar onto next week. Like, it took me not freaking out. And as soon as I said, okay, I'm going to replenish in my joys and in my strengths, and then I'm going to kick ass next week, that breath got deeper. That high anxiety in the chest energy started moving back, circulating, calming. And I felt like, okay, I had just misattuned with what I might have thought was possible. Maybe if I'd packed a cute suitcase and gone to Bermuda for 4 days. But that's not what happened,
Right.
right? I was carrying and lifting and cooking and firewooding, and God bless Richard, he took a great deal of the load.
Yeah.
And I was still overwhelmed with whatever bit of the load I was carrying.
Right.
Right. And as I told you, peak black fly season.
Yeah.
So I had
Yeah.
the most aggro bug bites happening as we're just trying to enjoy and relax.
Yeah.
And all that to say, and I'm rambling a little bit, sometimes it can look messy to change gears or to just acknowledge I'm in gear 1 and this is all gear 3 stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And what's actually going to be honoring and realistic,
Yes.
what's actually possible, because everything else is not helpful.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Does that
Yeah.
land?
100%. Yes. I'm really appreciating hearing you advocate for yourself in this way because when I got when I got your text on Tuesday night that like I knew that you had been away for a couple days. I didn't realize that you were away for 4 days and I was just like camping for 4 days. Not my idea of relaxation. I'm not Podesta, but it's not my idea. Not even an overnight. Like I'm just not a camper, right?
Yeah.
Not a camper. But 4 days, I have to tell you, I was like, I saw you as a little kid, and I'm like, I'm wondering how she's doing. Like I was, and then when we spoke last night, you told me about the fly bites. I was like, what? Anyway, and so I'm really glad you to hear you say that you took care of yourself today, yesterday, and today. And you were like, I don't have, even though that was on my calendar, and to know that you trusted yourself to have your own back is it, well, it's my mantra for 2021. Self trust and spirit trust are some of my words for 2021, um, and I love hearing that from my friends. I love it. I really do. It means it just means a lot to me. It tells me
Mhm.
that you love yourself enough to take care of yourself. Yeah. And the other stuff, that can wait. That it'll still be there
And
and
it'll
it's okay.
probably rock when I
Yes.
get to it. But to
Right.
force it just feels, and I will own, this didn't all kind of come out of my own self trust. It came from showing up to a coaching call anxious,
Hmm.
and my coach being like, "Okay, what's going on in your body? Where are you feeling it? Okay, what's the stories there?" And just being like, "Oh my God, I have all this stuff to do, and I'm so tired. I'm still recuperating."
Yeah.
Right, and getting to unpack that with someone to get to the point of like, oh, that's my ambitious self. I was totally misattuned. I haven't been camping since October. Like, I forgot how much I need like to replenish after.
Hmm.
And the little shining star, in my opinion, is knowing that I can still kick ass in some of my strengths, even while tired. Like, there is another presence, another energy that helps me do that because it's the stuff I love. And the stuff that I'm still learning, yeah, that part of my brain is not accessible. and, and trying to
Right.
force it just feels silly. I used to really
Right.
force it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So thank you. Yeah, and I can't say I'm a camper. Um, I love the stargazing. I love the fire gazing. I love the kayaking. I do not care for the bugs. I really do think someone's going to kill us in our sleep. Every time
Oh,
I kind of feel uncomfortable in the open space.
yeah.
Um, Not a fan of outhouses, right? And this time, because I'm edge stretching, right? This is something my partner loves to do. It's something that actually restores him, and I want to be with him.
Hmm.
And so it's the edge stretch each time for me. What was different this time is we had all those little window netty things open so I could see all four ways.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Anytime I thought someone was around, I could just look and literally see there wasn't.
Uh-huh.
And I didn't realize that having the closed up tent was what freaked me out
Mm.
because we were doing these colder nights.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, so that was a win for me. I didn't
Good.
panic at night in that way.
Good.
Something happens as the light starts to fall, though,
Hmm.
that makes me feel very vulnerable.
Yeah.
And it happens every time. The first night, when that twilight starts to set into darkness, I cry every time. I feel
Mm.
really vulnerable, and I think rightly so. In the wild, not on top at the top of the food chain with the dark coming.
Right. Right. Because it
And I'm
is
okay with
pitch.
that. Yeah.
It is pitch. Because when with trees, you really can't see and even if there were like stars or moon, you really can't see it because there's so much foliage
Mhm.
and you're underneath. There's no light
Yeah.
except the flashlights and the fire, and that's it. It is pitch.
Yeah. And for me, I come to a really humble place with the existential uncertainty. Like,
Hmm.
oh my gosh, anything could happen now. That's true all the time, but I
Mhm.
come really into touch with that.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
really a vulnerable edge stretch, and all I can say is I get better at it each time.
Mhm.
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 Is there anything like that in your world? Obviously, it doesn't have to be camping, but something that you kind of come back to as a place that grows you, even if it's challenging.
Yeah. 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 Um I, yeah. So right now I have a lot going on. Just I have a lot of stuff that I'm processing right now. And what I'm finding is that like it's all really challenging, hard stuff
Mhm.
that it is certainly, my growth edge undoubtedly. And I think for the first time in a long, long, long time, my resistance wall is not up. And I don't know why. Like that I'm questioning. I'm like, why am I not resistant to this? Which is a little fascinating, right? Because I'm going, God, it feels like I'm putting on the mud boots, and just kind of like sludging through. And I'm like, here's this, and here's this, and here's this. And this happened in my mid teens. I am almost 60. I didn't think I'd have to, I thought I dealt with that. I thought I processed that. I thought it worked. And here it is coming up again. In a different part of that onion is being unfurled, unlayered. And I'm like, okay, all right, no, let's. And it's not even like I had to have a talk with myself. It's really kind of come, these things have kind of, I would say they've gently unfolded. It wasn't like they all just kind of slammed me in the face.
Sure.
Um, so I will say that has been for me a real, yeah, like I feel myself at the edge of the cliff and I'm just like, no, I'm gonna keep going. I'm just gonna, I have myself. I trust that I'm going to be okay. If I have a breakdown, I have a breakdown. Like if I have to have an emotional break, it like I will get through this. I have a lot of support in my life. If I need more support, I know who my first chairs are. Like they had like undoubtedly, if I need whatever. So and that's, I will say that's a first for me, and that's a big deal. It's a really big deal. Um, yeah, and I'm also experiencing so what happens, and I think it also has to do with the new moon because we're starting a new cycle. So tonight we're having a new moon. And so for those who write abundance checks, this is your reminder to write your abundance check. I've written 3. I'm going to work on my 4th. Um, and then we're having an eclipse. So this is eclipse season. Summer is always eclipse season. So be prepared for that. So there's just a lot energetically going on in the universe. And I have had insomnia, well, every night since Sunday, I think.
Oh, wow.
It's just, it's been a bear.
Yeah.
Um, like I can fall asleep. Like I fall asleep pretty easily. Then I get up like at 3:30, 4 o'clock to go to the bathroom, and I go back to bed, and I'm up for a couple hours. Like I'm wide awake,
Mm.
and so I get out a book and I start reading because that typically, like, if I read, that can help me. No, when I'm awake, I'm awake. When I'm going through this insomnia period, like I'm going okay, and I just have to wait it through.
Mhm.
And I'm like, and so the mantra that I've been saying to myself over the last couple of nights is this too shall pass. It's not good. It doesn't go on for a long period of time,
Hmm.
typically like a week. And then I'm like, okay, we're through it. And then I can move back into my normalcy of sleep. Um, but I also think it has to do with a lot of stuff that I'm processing right now.
Sure.
So I've got a lot going on mentally, and I need to just remember to drop more into my body, into my pelvis, because that's my energy bowl, as you know, as we've learned from Janice, our dear friend Janice. Um, anyway, so I'm that's kind of where I am with that. So I wanted to share something really fun.
Oh no, you're gonna be laughing before you can share it.
So I had I don't even know what made I don't know why I was thinking about my age, but I was kind of like in the process of fall. This was last week, and I was in the process of falling asleep. And do you ever think about your age and you're like, am I really that age? Do you ever do that?
I forget about my age because I still feel like two 20-year-olds in a weird way.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. That's because that's where I always am. Like, I'm always like, oh, I'm 35, 40. I'm so not 35, 40. So I had this literal, like this moment of consciousness, and I was like, oh my God, I'm going to be 59 in November, which means I'll be 60 a year later. And I sat up, I literally got and I did got on the calculator. I'm like, that's right. That's right. I'll be 59 in November and I'll be 60. Oh my God. Like I have to tell you, like 50 for me was pretty easy. Like that transition of
Mhm.
that decade was, I didn't have an issue with it. And I really didn't think about it too much.
Yeah,
But 60, for some reason, I'm just like, oh my gosh,
yeah,
60. I don't know what it is about 60, but um and I'm looking forward to it. You know, because I just feel like every decade has been better than the last one for me.
yeah.
Um
Oh yeah, I agree.
yeah, hands down, right? Yeah. So anyway, I literally was like, as I was calculating, I was laughing at myself. I was having so much fun, just like, you are you are ridiculous, Heidi. Like, this is hilarious. Like, I can't believe like, and then I asked, I'm like, how old do you really think you are? 35, 40 maybe? Oh my God. Just yeah. Just
Oh, I love it. Well, it makes sense to me because I feel like those decade marks can have a very different feeling to them.
uh-huh.
I know when like 6 months before I was turning 40, I really went through, it wasn't a midlife crisis, it was like a real midlife check-in, right? It was like, hang on, do I want to be doing finance? Wait a minute. Do I want to be married? Wait, like all the things that sort of I think society had put in my lap came into question. And it was a bit of a mind screw, I will say, because I wasn't where I thought I'd be. And I was really surprised as it relates to career, how I sort of was on autopilot.
Mhm.
You know, I was a great assistant. Somehow someone noticed I was smart. Then I got this training and that training to save organizations money. Somehow I became a bookkeeper, and then somehow I became like this finance person. And one day it was like, what the hell happened? I've been a little bit doing the autopilot thing,
Mhm.
and it was the best thing that happened to me, but it was really painful
Mm.
because it meant a lot of change, good change, going back to school, finding a purpose I believed in, really aligning with my soul work, and it was painful to see the gap between that and where I was.
Mm.
And I just want to name that for people. Like if they're there's always a starting line, right? It's like, man, I want to be over here, and the gap can really hurt.
Mhm.
But then the gap hurting kind of has your back
Yeah.
in moving you towards the vision.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Oh, I'm so glad you brought that up because this is something that I haven't thought about or talked about for a real like years and years. But I went through something what's so just my perception of what I think you're saying. I went through something similar when in my 30s, like my ovaries were screaming for a baby, right? Like in my teens and my 20s, I was just like, hell, like the no was a hell no. I was like, I don't want babies. No, 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 don't want the babies. 30s, very different story.
Mm-hmm.
And as you know, my major was fashion design. And interestingly enough, and I didn't put this together until after I graduated, but every garment, every design that I sketched, every garment that I sewed, everything that I draped was either around children or maternity.
Wow.
Wild, right?
Yeah.
And when I was in a relationship in college, but it wasn't the kind of relationship that was going to amount to anything. He was much, 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 much younger than me, and we just were in very different parts of our lives.
Mm-hmm.
So I realized that I'm like, okay, so I'm not going to have a baby with him, but could I still do I really, you know, do I want this, right? And so then after graduation, which was around 34, 35 years old, I really had to I'm like, okay, so what is it that I really want? And
Mm-hmm.
then when I realized that, okay, so I haven't, so from this point in the past, I haven't had a baby. My life has been great. I've really liked my independence and not having the responsibility. If I have a baby this year, how different is that going to be and how might that look, right? And I kept, just kind of kept putting it off and putting it off and putting it off for a couple different reasons. Financially, I just wasn't in a place to have a child. Um, and um, and I did have a couple friends who were like, I'm volunteering. I'm like, thank you, but no, thank you, but we're good. Um, right? Like, you don't need to go to a sperm bank. We're volunteering. I'm like, thank you. I appreciate that, but no. Um, but it was just the whole that period of my life was I felt like this roller coaster of emotions because when I realized that I was not going to have a child, that grief period was years long. And it wasn't every day. It wasn't every day grief, 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 but it was about that. But it was years of this back and forth, this very fluid kind of grief process. And I was like, okay. And so the growth in that, I'm like, and I look at my life now, and I'm like, I'm so glad. Thank you. Thank you. Jesus. Thank you. Really, I mean, I just no. I really love my independence. Love my single life. I all of it. Yeah.
I so appreciate you sharing this. I don't think it's something women often speak of,
Oh, they don't.
frankly. And I remember as a kid, I didn't like kids. I didn't like their frenetic energy. I liked the teachers. I liked the babysitter.
Mhm.
I liked hanging out with my aunts and uncles. But I didn't like being around kid energy as a highly sensitive person.
Mhm.
Um, and as a teenager, I thought the world was just such a mess. I didn't want to bring kids into it. And in my 20s, I was essentially just a train wreck that was trying to sort itself out.
Mhm.
And in most of my 30s, I was like, no thanks. I want to travel the world. I want a partner. I want to make music. I want to make art. I want to do my part to be a beneficial presence in the world, like a teacher. But there was this window, and I think it had two reasons. One was I was dating Richard, and he definitely has those qualities of a father. Being, he has five nephews. He's a godfather to several of them.
Mhm.
He's the guy in the pool while everyone else is hanging out. letting kids jump off his shoulders,
Mm-hmm.
doing all the things. That was one piece. And the second piece, which you've brought up, was like the end of the ovaries, like the end of the egg stuff, right? Because there's a certain point between 35 and like 37 where you go down to like the last
Mm-hmm.
20% of your eggs, and the
Mm-hmm.
body hits an alarm bell
Right.
biologically that goes like now or never.
Right.
And there was a 6 month period that was such an identity crisis for me, because when people would be like, "Oh, you want to hold the baby?" I was like, "Goopy, squirmy, sticky, no, thank you,"
Mm-hmm.
in my head. And that 6 month period, every time I saw a baby, I was like, "Oh, oh," and I was so lost and confused because all my life it was a hell no,
Mm.
and all of a sudden it was a yearning, and it was so confusing because that was not what the trajectory of my life had looked like and what I had wanted it to look like. And of course, here I have a partner who did not want kids, going, God, do I hold you up if that's really what you're, right? Like there's a
Mm-hmm.
respect and an awareness from good men of not holding a woman up in her late 30s, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it passed.
Mm.
Like it took 5 or 6 months. And I went right back to like my norm. And I was like, thank God I didn't react
Yeah.
from that place, because I really, like you, appreciate the freedom.
Mm-hmm.
I teach kids, I coach kids, I mother in like daily.
Mm-hmm.
And I also love the quietude and the freedom of of my life. But I don't know what the hell that was and why nobody talks about it. Like, watch out. You're going to have this weird identity crisis
Right.
because, like you said, your ovaries will be screaming
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
all of a
And
sudden.
yeah, yeah. And I think what whoever they is, but what they don't tell you is that, like you said, and I didn't really, I mean, like I said, from my 30s all the way, like from 30 to 40, even though realistically I probably would not have been able to conceive between 35 and 40. Probably not. Like the chances were much less.
Yeah.
Between 30 and 35, sure. But I was in the height, like I was in college and pulling all nighters in the studios and working my ass off and, all that kind of stuff. So I wasn't going to have a baby then. So when I was ready to have a baby, I probably could not have had one anyway, biologically. So what the reason I'm saying this is because I know so many women who have spent they go to college when they typically go to college at the age of 18 after high school. I went much later, but so most women who do that and then they get out of college, they get a job in their field and they start to climb the corporate ladder or start working on their career, blah, blah, blah. And then they have their career under their belt and then they want to start a family. And it's on some level it's too late because of their age. And so I feel like on in some way I feel like we've kind of been ripped off. Like it would be nice if our eggs had a longer life shelf life or
Mm-hmm.
lifespan,
Yeah.
um, because our bodies really can give birth at 40, at 45. Like our
Mm-hmm.
bodies can regulate and do all the things they need to do to grow to grow the baby. And yes, there are risks, but we can do it because it's been done. um but it's just so unfortunate that I guess it's between whenever a girl starts menstruating until
Mm-hmm.
she's 27, 28. That's when she's the ripest.
The
Is that
rapist.
right? Like,
That word.
sorry.
I don't know how I feel about that word.
When
I
her
love you
eggs,
though. It's okay. The rapist? But
when
yes,
her eggs, when she's most fertile
and probably has the healthier
and
eggs.
has the health and has the greatest amount of eggs too, right? So it's I and I feel I was just listening to this and I'll send it to you that this is that 9-part series.
Mm-hmm.
And the last one was on infertility, women's, like it was all about women's health. Fascinating stuff.
Thank you. Please
Really,
share.
it's so good. And several of the doctors were talking about, women who've had infertility issues and they go through the IVF and they try all this stuff. And it's not until they stop trying where their bodies relax, they're no longer stressed, and they conceive.
Yeah.
But it's amazing what stress can do to our bodies and
Oh my
how we
gosh.
heighten and how it's almost like I have a couple of women in my life, which you probably do too, who you've known who have tried to conceive and gone through a lot of the stuff that, giving themselves shots and blah, all this other. And I can think of two friends off the top of my head who once they were like, not even going to try anymore. We're looking into adoption,
Right.
and they get pregnant.
Wow.
You know,
Yeah.
um, yeah, it's
It's a big
really,
deal. It's a big
it,
deal. And I just want to honor what you said about the feeling robbed piece, because I have felt that in my heart, the unfairness of the timelines, right? So often in dating, it's like partners I have loved, and I wasn't necessarily looking for a kid, but I'm thinking of other women who were, who like lollygagged 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, right? Because they had all the time in the world and maybe weren't really conscious of the real limited timeline
yeah,
that is available to a woman. That part breaks my heart a little bit. Um, and then, yeah, for whatever reason, nature's decided those timelines. I have seen friends become first time fathers at 60, male friends, right? And I've seen female friends, as you said, take 145 injections and creams and things and do it 2 or 3 times, um, and still not get to that place of their heart's desire. And it feels unfortunate. I think it's our society. It's like, yes, we're all trying to build our lives and feel really secure before we are the guardian of another life.
mhm,
And women have to figure it out in a crunchier time frame
mhm,
if they really want that family,
yeah,
And there is the miracle of IVF and all that stuff, but it's
right.
not without its
And
frustration.
there's no
Stresses.
guarantee. There's no guarantee, and it's so expensive. So to put, not, I mean, this is not a pun at all, but to put your, to in quote unquote, put your all your eggs in one basket, like really no pun intended, but to put everything, like all of your money into something that there's no guarantee, and then to come out empty handed, that would really suck.
And it's
Like
all
I
those
don't,
hopeful days too, right? It's not like, I put money in and maybe this thing will come through, but
right.
I imagine I'm just, as human beings, like really getting your hopes up, really moving through the days with this possibility,
Hmm.
and then having to grieve it all the same.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Mm.
Hmm. Yeah.
Thank you. That feels like something that needed to be voiced. That how different it is for women.
Right. Right. Because if a man is really healthy and virile,
Hmm.
he can father a child. I, I don't know what the oldest. I don't
I
know
don't
what the
either. We
oldest.
gotta look it
Let's
up.
maybe we should Google that. But I
Yeah.
don't know what the oldest father is. But seriously, like, if someone's sperm can be healthy at 87 or 90, that just like that. I'm like, come on,
But I think
it
the
just,
difference is like the daily making of a certain
yeah,
thing versus like we are born with
right,
as much as we're gonna have. It's like we're not growing eggs in
right,
there, you
right,
know?
yeah,
So it's very different. And I trust nature's wisdom, and I think it still is really unfair given that, we don't get till 50 to figure our lives out.
Right. Yeah.
If that's what we want our lives to be about.
Hmm. Right.
Like you said, really 35 is a bit of a cap. I've seen some miracle babies at 40 and 43 and
Hmm.
the IVF babies. Like it's all possible, but like the easy, natural, healthy, don't worry about it piece.
Yeah.
That's a very limited timeline.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Hmm.
I don't have my cards with me, so I don't know if we should
Oh, you don't?
chat pack
Let's
or.
do a chat pack question. Because I love my chat pack.
Yes, I love it too.
Okay. Okay. What is the farthest what is the farthest distance you have traveled from your home?
Hmm. Hmm. I feel like I have a two-parter to that because I think of home as Kabul,
Oh
where
yeah.
I was
Mhm.
born.
Mhm.
I think the farthest I've traveled is LA. From there, that would be 15,000 miles, I guess. Um, and then I almost feel like home is source, so I feel like that's a farther travel to get here and be on Earth. That makes sense. Like
Mhm.
that feels like a real travel
Mhm.
endeavor. And then I was trying to figure out if Rio de Janeiro was farther from LA or if Spain was farther from New York. And I don't really know.
I don't know that either. Yeah. Yeah.
So those
Yeah.
are my answers. What
Okay.
about you? What's the farthest distance you've traveled from home? And I got esoteric there, but you could too.
Yeah. Um so I also don't know if Panama is further than Europe. Um but those are the two farthest places that I've traveled. And in Europe, I have been to Germany and Austria and Switzerland. I and and northern Italy. So that was when those were two different skiing vacations. And then of course, I lived in Rome for 6 months. My third year of college, I went abroad for 6 months. Um, and then when I was a little wee little girl at the age of 4, my father was stationed in Panama. Have I told you about that?
Hmm.
Yeah. And we were there for 4 years. Yeah. Uh, and yeah, I mean, just adventures all around. It's a really good. Yeah.
Mm.
I feel very fortunate.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah. And maybe we'll get to go back to Italy again.
We're going, girl.
Ah! I don't want to be like a weird stalker, but there's a part of me that's like, I really want to meet Andrea Bocelli. I really want to see. I don't know enough about Italy, but I feel like the South
Mm.
feels good to me. I mean, I'm open. We're getting on a trip. I'm open to all of it. Um, yeah. Thank you. Thanks for being
Yeah.
my partner in crime there.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Hmm.
So I think this is episode 32 or 33 of Cocktails and Pajamas. We appreciate those who have joined us this evening. If you're wanting to say hello or send us a like. And yeah, if you have a question or comment about something, feel free to pop it in and we will get back to you. Um, I'm Heidi,
I'm Firishta.
and we hope you have a wonderful, lovely evening.
So much love.